Have you ever spent an hour fighting Flexbox, adding random margins, nesting containers inside containers, and then writing 5 different media queries just to make a layout behave? Welcome to the reason professional developers stop suffering. CSS Grid isn't just another layout tool. It's the closest thing web developers have to superpowers. In 2026, Grid is the foundation of modern web applications, dashboards, portfolios, SaaS products, admin panels, e-commerce platforms, and pretty much every serious website you can think of. The best part, you'll learn how to build layouts that practically resize themselves. By the end of this lesson, you'll understand display, grid, FR units, repeat, minmax, grid areas, gap, align self, justify self, and subgrid. And trust me, once grid clicks, you'll wonder how you ever survived without it. Let's get started. Before we write a single line of code, let's talk about why CSS Grid exists. When developers first start learning layouts, Flexbox feels like magic. You can align items, center content, create rows, and distribute space beautifully. But eventually you run into a problem. Real websites aren't one-dimensional. A dashboard isn't just a row. A magazine layout isn't just a column. A portfolio page isn't just a list of cards. Modern interfaces need rows and columns working together. That's exactly what CSS Grid was designed to solve. Here's the easiest way to think about it. Flexbox organizes items inside a row or a column. Grid designs the entire layout structure. Think of Flexbox as organizing books on a shelf. Think of Grid as designing the entire bookshelf. Let's jump into VS Code and see it in action. Create a new file called grid.html. Type an exclamation mark and press Tab to generate the HTML boilerplate. Inside the body, create a container with 6 child elements. Let's move to the CSS section. Select the container and type display grid. That's it, you've officially enabled Grid. Nothing looks different yet. The items are still stacked on top of each other. That's because Grid needs instructions about how many columns or rows we want. Let's fix that. Add this property, grid template columns 1FR, 1FR, 1FR. Immediately, your 6 items are organized into 3 equal columns. And this introduces one of the most important grid concepts you'll ever learn. The FR unit, FR, stands for fraction. It divides available space into proportional pieces. 1 fraction, 1 fraction, 1 fraction, 3 equal columns. Simple. Now let's make the first column larger. Change the code to 2FR, 1FR, 1FR. Watch what happens. The first column now receives twice as much space as the others. This is incredibly useful for layouts with sidebars, content areas, dashboards, and landing pages. Instead of manually calculating widths, Grid handles the math for you. This is one of those moments where CSS starts feeling less like styling and more like engineering. If that idea just clicked for you, hit subscribe, because from this point forward, we're building layouts the way modern front-end engineers actually build them. Now let's make our code cleaner. Nobody enjoys writing the same thing over and over. Instead of this, 1FR, 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 we can write repeat 3, 1FR. Same result, much cleaner. The first value tells Grid how many times to repeat. The second value tells Grid what to repeat. This becomes incredibly powerful when building large systems. For example, repeat 12, 1FR instantly creates a 12-column layout system. Sound familiar? That's because 12-column grids have been used by professional designers and developers for years. Grid makes them effortless. Now we're about to learn the feature that makes developers fall in love with CSS Grid, responsive layouts without traditional media queries. Type this, grid template columns, repeat auto fit, minmax 250px, 1FR. I know it looks intimidating, but let's break it down. Auto fit means create as many columns as possible. Minmax means never let a column become smaller than 250 pixels. And if extra space is available, allow the column to grow and fill it. Now watch carefully as I resize the browser window. The layout automatically adapts. Columns are added, columns are removed, cards resize themselves. Everything remains clean, and we didn't write a single media query. This is why modern CSS developers love Grid. Many responsive layouts that once required dozens of breakpoint rules can now be handled with a single line of code. If you're following along, this is a perfect time to grab the takeaway summary and code snippets linked below. They'll save you a ton of time when reviewing today's lesson. Let's talk about spacing. One of the most common mistakes beginners make is adding random margins between elements. Grid gives us something better, the gap property. Add gap 20px. Immediately, every grid item receives consistent spacing. No margin hacks, no weird edge cases, just clean spacing. Gap works both horizontally and vertically. It's one of those small features that dramatically improves code quality. Grid can also control rows. For example, grid template rows, 100px, 200px, 100px. This creates 3 rows with different heights. Just like columns, rows can use fixed units, fractions, percentages, min-max, and many other sizing options. Now let's learn one of the most powerful layout techniques in CSS Grid. Grid areas. Create a layout containing a header, sidebar, main content section, and footer. Inside your grid container, define grid template areas, then write header, header sidebar, main footer, footer. Take a second and look at that. You're literally drawing the layout with words. Now assign each element to its area using the grid area property. Header becomes header, sidebar becomes sidebar, main becomes main, footer becomes footer. Refresh the browser, instant layout. This is one of the most readable layout systems ever added to CSS. Even someone who has never seen your code before can immediately understand the structure. That's incredibly valuable when working on professional teams. Quick question for you. What's your favorite layout tool right now? Flexbox, Grid, or a combination of both? Drop your answer in the comments and tell me why. I'm curious to see how everyone approaches layouts. Next, let's talk about positioning individual grid items. Sometimes an item needs special treatment. Maybe a badge needs to be centered. Maybe a card needs to move independently. That's where align self and justify self come in. Align self controls positioning along the block axis. In most layouts, that's vertical alignment. Justify self controls positioning along the inline axis, usually horizontal alignment. Add align self center, justify self center, and watch the selected item move to the center of its grid cell. These properties are perfect when one specific item needs different alignment than everything else. Now let's discuss a feature developers requested for years, Subgrid. Before Subgrid existed, nested grids often became misaligned. Imagine a collection of cards. Each card contains a title, image, description, and button. The content lengths vary. The buttons end up misaligned. The cards look uneven. Developers spent years creating workarounds. Then Subgrid arrived. Subgrid allows child grids to inherit track definitions from their parent grid. In other words, nested layouts can stay perfectly aligned. This is especially useful in dashboards, e-commerce cards, pricing sections, portfolios, and complex design systems. While not every project needs Subgrid, knowing it exists gives you a huge advantage when building professional interfaces. Now it's your turn. Here's your challenge. Build a responsive photo gallery using CSS Grid. Your gallery must use display grid repeat, autofit minmax, and gap. For bonus points, create a featured image that spans multiple columns using grid column span to. Don't copy my version. Build your own, experiment, break things, fix them. That's how real learning happens. Let's wrap everything up. Today you learned how to activate Grid with display grid. You learned how FR units divide available space proportionally. You learned how repeat reduces repetitive code. You learned how min-max creates flexible layouts. You learned how autofit enables responsive designs. You learned how gap creates clean spacing. You learned how grid areas allow you to visually design page structures. You learned how align self and justify self control individual items. And you learned how Subgrid solves alignment problems in nested layouts. Most importantly, you learned one of the most valuable modern CSS patterns. Repeat autofit minmax 250px 1fr. That single line can eliminate huge amounts of responsive layout code. And that's a major step toward becoming a professional front-end developer. Before you leave, take the quiz linked in the description to lock in everything you learned today. If this lesson helped you finally understand CSS Grid, hit the like button, share this video with another developer, and subscribe for the next episode. Because next time, we're diving into container queries, the feature that's changing responsive design forever. I'll see you in the next lesson. Happy coding.